Ladies and gentlemen, members, officers, and sundry visitors, welcome. Welcome to this Fire Authority meeting. It being 10:30, we'll make a start. I have to read out all the gumph. Welcome to this meeting of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. This meeting is being held at our fire and police headquarters in Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewings. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. Now, there is a fire alarm today. You don't have to do anything. Well, we're in the right place if there is. 11 o'clock, the fire alarms will go off. Do remain seated, please. They will go for a minute. More than a minute, follow me. Out into the car park. Microphones, you know all about them. Apologies for absence. Katie?
We have apologies from Councillor Fran Carpenter and also Donna Jones, Police and Crime Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. And members, any declaration of interest? No. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 12 in your paperwork. Anybody got any comments, alterations, or can I sign them as a true account of what went on? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Deputations, any deputations? None? Right, Chairman's announcements. There's quite a few. Love Christmas campaign. St Mary's Fire Station joined up with a nearby St Mary's Church to support their Love Christmas campaign and help pack and deliver 1,600 hampers to families in need across the city. This heartwarming initiative, aimed at supporting isolated individuals and struggling families, particularly single parents, saw firefighters stepping up, not just with their time, but also with infectious energy and festive cheer. The crews, led by watch managers Ben Tatman and Penn Larkham from the City Centre Station Green and Blue Watch teams, brought smiles and teamwork to the cause, showing that the season of giving was alive and well. So well done them. Good stuff. There was a trainee firefighters graduation on Thursday the 19th of December, to which I think we had about 5 authority members, which was a good showing. And we also had one of the Deputy Lord Lieutenants of Hampshire, Mr. John Whittaker, who was mightily impressed, which is always good. Remember, we get wonderful support from our Lord Lieutenant over the things that we do, which and long may it last. So the Deputy Lieutenants are always welcome. The event marked the end of 17 weeks training delivered by our Learning and Development team, during which our trainees honed and showcased their firefighting ability after successfully passing a rigorous and thorough interview and application process. These new members of our teams have now started at their stations. We also had 3 trainees from Guernsey Fire and Rescue Service, and they melded in and did well with the others. This arrangement was once again supported by a team at 3S Fire. And congratulations to all our newly qualified firefighters. South Seas Fire Station Annual Senior Citizens Show. More than 350 senior citizens from across Portsmouth were treated to South Seas Fire Station's 42nd annual show at the city's Guildhall on the 19th of January. Did anyone go to that? You did? Okay. The older residents were able to socialise with friends and family and enjoy the top-class entertainment. Oh yeah, I saw the photographs. Interesting. Anyone arrested?
Not this year.
Top-class entertainment and food on offer whilst engaging with the fire service and receiving valuable safety advice. This hugely popular event is a staple in the Portsmouth calendar and free to attend for pensioners across the city. 3 of our local station watches put on performances, and they were joined on the bill by a clarinet performance, Chinese dancers, a new dance school, and the return of the Irish band. Amongst the attendees was the Lord Mayor of Portsmouth and our very own Chief Fire Officer. I'm sure members would agree that the Chief Fire Officer that not only is this show a fantastic way for the service to engage with some of the most vulnerable people in Portsmouth's community, but it provides an opportunity to socialise whilst enjoying top-class entertainment. Our thanks to everyone who's involved in or performed at the show, with special thanks to Beth Medway and Southsea Greenwatch for leading the event planning. Moving to the Isle of Wight, Ryde Fire Station now offers 24/7 response. We are pleased to announce that Ryde Fire Station became a whole-time crewed station on the 1st of January, offering a 24/7 response. Previously, the station had been crewed during the day, but incidents overnight have been responded to by our on-call firefighters. Now with day and night whole-time crews on the island based at Ryde and Newport offering 24/7 response, the service can offer a quicker response to incidents and take part in more prevention work, including home fire safety visits in the evening. Consultation on changes to AFA response. The service is currently consulting on the way it responds to automatic fire alarms in commercial premises. The consultation closes on the 9th of February, after which the response will be considered. Local government reorganisation. Now, you all know that we are facing huge reorganisations, so I won't go into it all. Suffice it to say, we still await decisions from the government on devolution and the issue of elections, and I am told that a decision will be imminent. So they always say that, don't they? Yes. Right, item 6 then, members' developments. Members, tell me what you've been doing on behalf of the authority with our fire service. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so I came along to the graduation ceremony, as you mentioned. I think that was on the 19th. That was 2 days after our previous meeting. And it's always great, and I take much joy in talking to all of the parents and the loved ones of those who are going to graduate. And it's hugely rewarding because they are they're proud as punch of their relatives. And in fact, I think there was one lady who I met her daughter, and it was the mum who was graduating. So that was good to see that we're attracting all sorts, all ages, and it's the enthusiasm that counts. And there was plenty of that. So it's always a pleasure to come along. For those who haven't made it then do come along. Thank you.
George?
Yeah, reasonably interesting one. I'm not sure if any members are aware, but there was a bit of a error at the Cosham Fire Station where Portsmouth City Council for some reason still owned a few little parcels of land that our new station has occupied. It's been a bit of a back and forth because land register, in theory, Portsmouth City Council didn't sell them to the fire authority. However, I've just been informed yesterday that our directors have approved to transfer the land registry documents over to the fire authority free of charge with no administration costs. So I've just let the officers know that. So that's obviously good news because that was going back and forth for a little while. But that's all. But it's only really tiny parcels of land. It's not a massive amount. So it's more of a technicality. And say the council had no use for the land at all because the fire authority were essentially using them anyway. But it's an administrative thing that's been resolved. And I say I've just had confirmation from our senior directors yesterday that those pieces of land are going to be transferred to the fire authority at no additional cost.
Well, phew. Thanks. They're not having it back. It's our fire station now. Derek.
Little to report. I did attend the firefighters' graduation again, despite the cold day, etc. It was a very good day.
Roger.
Right. I also attended the graduation, and again, as usual, it was very good. And also, it's good to see that 3S Fire was involved in it as well. I also attended Cosham Fire Station, and I found that one of the most interesting visits I've had for a long time, because how innovative it is in all the things that are going on there. And what did surprise me, I'm sorry to say it, George, is that Portsmouth was originally going to pay for the wigwam signals outside the fire station, but they're now not paying for that, and that's come back onto us to pay for. When it was supposed to be all sorted out, that they were sorting that out. I was quite surprised about that. But it may have been tied up with this land transactions as well. I don't know. But I found it was very interesting in seeing the amount of equipment that there is there for the training, with the towers and what have you. And when you look at that, it's obviously, I assume, going to be a southeast area of Hampshire training point or main training point. And I think that's exceptionally good. And I also understand from that visit that there are a number of other people up and down the country looking at it for. There was something special about the poles, because they go for up 2 levels. So the other services are looking at that of how we've done it. I also had a SAR pensions meeting in London, and I think that other than the technicalities regarding the pensions and what needs to be done on them, which I won't go into, but the thing which came out of it, which I thought was quite interesting, and this was from a Home Office update, and that is that fire to move to a new ministry, consultation within government ends in April 25. So whereas we're split at the moment, there's likelihood of going into one. So that was that one, and I also attended the next day the Fire Service Management Committee in London, and again, coming out of that, I think that the the Home Office report was that the Labour government is going to stick to their manifesto and what they said regarding fire. So I think that's important, which gives us really a blueprint to look at to see what is likely to happen. So that's that one. From finance, looking at a 2-year settlement for the 26, 27, 27, 28, which will be very good for us. And also that there was a guarantee from that we would get, which is interesting when you read our finance papers here, the full money refunded for the national insurance payment, which was introduced. And that was said that would be a full repayment, but that's obviously, from the figures we've had, isn't going to happen. And I think that is something which needs to be dealt with somewhere along the line. Regarding the workforce, the FBU hasn't put in, there's no figure from them yet, what they'll be looking for pay increase, and theirs isn't until June, I think. June or July? June. The Gold Book, which was supposed to be come into pay on the 1st of January, the members at national level under Gold Book at the time of the meeting hadn't put in a claim at all. So I don't know whether that has gone in since. But that I think is really very difficult, because it makes the whole thing just drift and difficult for fire authorities to know what there is to pay. So, or put into their budgets, I should say. But that's just a brief outline of where I've been and what I've done.
Thank you, Roger. Very industrious. Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. I too attended the fire graduation. Always a great privilege to attend those. And since then, obviously, we've had Christmas. So in the new year, I've had a meeting with people in organisation, with Molly, where we've looked at the newly developed or is in development delivery plan. So it's a 5-year delivery plan for that department or directorate. Where, again, within that 5-year plan, they'll also look at lead activities or milestones to achieve that 5-year delivery plan on our people and organisation. I will say this has been a journey, so it follows on from the good work that I know Molly and her team have been doing when we talk about the cultural review some of the actions following the previous inspectorate, the people and the policy, so performance, and then following that through from the safety plan, and also the EDI training that we've introduced. I also met with Ben Allen, who looks at the training within Molly's department, where we also talked about the apprenticeship programme and the use of levies, and also the delivery of the training programmes within that 5-year plan and lead activities. And I was really interested to hear that we currently have about 17 apprentices on anywhere from a level 2 to a level 6 leadership and management qualification. So that was a really informative meeting, and I look forward to see how those delivery plans are progressing, Molly, and how we can bring in those KPIs and performance measures into the authority. And I'm due to meet children and young people in the next month. So thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Sally.
Yeah, I haven't actually attended anything, but just wanted to, my apologies noted for the graduation of the new firefighters. I had a family emergency. I was literally out the door ready to come to Eastleigh and had to go and pick up my son from school and take him to A&E due to a sports injury. My other work that I've also been doing is I've still been doing a lot of work, as I've mentioned before, with the prevention team. I think the Grenfell outcome has stirred up quite a lot of concern with residents living in high-rise flats just around fire safety. So yeah, I've got 3 cases on at the moment, and the cladding issue is still an issue as well. Just thought I'd make that noted.
Okay, thank you. Any more? No? Good. Okay, well, let's move on to the first paper, item 7, which is the budget and precept requirements for 25-26, including the medium-term financial plan. And this is on page 13 of your paperwork. So I would invite Catherine to present this paper, please.
Thank you. Good morning, members. So the first thing I wanted to flag is this addendum to the budget report, which is in your pack on ModGov, but also on a paper copy on your table, because unfortunately it wasn't published until yesterday. And actually the amendments to the figures is relatively small, so it's only a 66k net improvement on the position. The reason that we had to publish some of this information as an addendum is that the final information from billing authorities wasn't available till the 31st of January, and the final local government settlement wasn't announced until the 3rd of February. So we just, because of the early timing of this meeting, we just didn't quite have all the information. So it contains a revised Appendix 1A, Appendix B and Appendix D, which is set out in paragraph 5, and fully revised recommendations so that we've got all the recommendations clearly in one place. So that the numbers haven't changed greatly, but there are some differences. So I will, I'm happy to take any questions about that. So to move on to the main report, it is quite a long report. I've just seen it's just over 100 pages, and there are some parts of the report that are quite technical. So that the whole report covers the revenue budget, the capital programme, the medium-term plan, our reserve strategy, the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, the capital investment strategy, the Section 25 report, which is my report as the Chief Financial Officer, and an efficiency and productivity appendix. So hopefully you'll be pleased to hear that I'm going to cover the key points of the main report, but not go through each appendix in great detail. But obviously I'm really happy to take questions on the main report or on any of the appendices. So to move on through the main report, paragraph 15 in the original main report flagged that some information was outstanding. So the addendum provides updates on some of those missing pieces of information. We still haven't had notification from the Home Office about the Home Office grants, so we're expecting that within the next couple of days. So should any of those numbers be different than what's contained in this paperwork, we'll report it back to the Fire Authority at the next opportunity. So paragraph 16 to 19 cover the in-year monitoring position, and that position is a forecast underspend of £980,000. So it's broadly similar to the position that we have been reporting in previous quarters, with underspends on pay costs and some additional income, which are partially offset by some non-pay overspends. Some of these non-pay overspends, particularly on pension costs and the Network Fire Services Partnership, have been addressed as part of the budget setting process for next year. So hopefully we won't continue to see those reported next year. The section also covers off some one-off additional underspends that we have during 24-25, and these are resulting from the fact that currently we haven't used the contingency which is held within the budget, and we've also had some additional income from investments. So interest rates continue to be higher than they have been, and although our reserve balances are reducing because of really positive progress on the capital programme, we still have reasonably high reserve balances, certainly at some points in the year, which mean that we've generated some additional income from investments. So we can't build that into the budget for future years because our reserve balances are forecast to reduce as our interest rates, but for this year it's given us a one-off benefit. So the proposal in the report is that this one-off benefit from the unused contingency and investment income is contributed to the budget equalisation reserve to strengthen our mitigations against some of the risks within the budget, and also to allow us to close the budget gap for the next financial year. And it's important that we can do this because of the deficit for 25-26 and the forecast deficit for future years. So paragraph 20 onwards talks about the 25-26 budget position. So to remind members that the December report set out a revised budget deficit of 3.339 million for 25-26 financial year, and that was based on a £5 council tax increase. Since that report, there have been a couple of important changes. So, as Councillor Price mentioned, we had received assurances that the impact of the employer's national insurance increase would be fully funded, but we have forecast and since received confirmation of the grant, and it's just under 50% of the increase, which is of the forecast increase, which is being funded. And I think this is probably for a couple of reasons. One is that the funding allocation was based on net expenditure, not net pay expenditure. So for other sorts of authorities where their pay costs are a lower proportion of their overall spend, they will have sort of benefited from that allocation methodology. For fire and rescue services, because pay costs are a very high proportion of our spend, we have been disadvantaged by that. And then there's also the impact of the reduction in NI thresholds on our on-call firefighters. So because we have a significant proportion of the workforce who are affected by that reduction in threshold, the cost of the NI rise has been greater for us than it would have been for other employers. So the shortfall is larger. So it is really disappointing to note that, and the fire sector as a whole did lobby for a change to this allocation methodology in the response to the consultation. There was a slight change to how the funding was allocated, but it didn't address the threshold reduction. So we shall continue to make representations about the impact of this on our service. So other changes have been set out in the table in paragraph 26. They just talk about how we got from the budget gap in the December 2024 budget to the deficit forecast for next year. That deficit is actually now 66k lower, so it's 1.813 million as a result of the addendum to the budget report. So the good news is that that deficit can be funded from the use of the Budget Equalisation Reserve, which is a reserve that we have put aside for this purpose. So that is not diverting already committed resources from elsewhere to balance the budget. Paragraph 27 to 38 deal with council tax. So the report proposes to the Fire Authority an increase of council tax to the referendum limit of £5, which is 6.04% per annum for a Band D household. The graph in paragraph 30 shows that the majority of residents of households in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight are in properties that are below Band D, and so they will see a lower increase than the £5 per annum. And then the graph in paragraph 31 is just illustrative of the fact that the Fire Authority still has relatively low council tax compared to other fire and rescue authorities. So even with this increase, we still remain sort of, I think, in the bottom third of council tax, Fire Authority's council tax levels. It's also worth noting that all of the government calculations about funding assume that local authorities raise council tax by the referendum limit. So all of the council tax spending power increase, etc., figures for fire and rescue authorities always assume that the maximum increase is introduced. So paragraph 32 I think is quite an important one, and it talks about sort of what does this council tax rise, what benefit does that bring to the fire authority? So it is true that the council tax increase is above current levels of inflation as measured by the Consumer Prices Index. But there are a couple of sort of important caveats to note on that. So council tax funds around 60% of, is about 60% of the funding for the Fire and Rescue Authority, and other funding hasn't increased by anything like 6.04%. In fact, there have been some elements of our funding, such as the funding guarantee and the services grant, which have been removed entirely. So rather than an increase, there have actually been a total reduction of those grants. It's also really important to note, and as you can see from the capital section later, the authority does continue to invest in the capital programme, which is essential for the ongoing delivery of services, but we receive no funding at all for that capital programme. So though our revenue funding is increasing, our capital funding is still, we still don't have anything at all. So we have to continue to find funding to repay borrowing for the capital programme and any revenue investments we're making from the revenue budget. So paragraph 53 onwards talks about the importance of the £5 increase for the 25-26 budget, but also for the onward position. The remainder of this section just talks about business rates and other grants. So very happy to take questions on any of those. So from in paragraph 53, there is and paragraph 48 onwards talks about pressures within the budget. And the table in paragraph 53 shows some of the key pressures that have been included within the budget. So the first three pressures on ill health and injury pensions, the Network Fire Services Partnership and occupational health and wellbeing were covered in the December 2024 report. There's a small additional pressure relating to a cross-service team to manage the ongoing national operational guidance updates. And then you can see that there's a pressure from NI changes, and then the final amount of borrowing costs necessary for repaying the approved prudential borrowing. Paragraphs 55 to 59 and Appendix H outline the efficiencies which have been planned for next year. And it's really worth highlighting that the service is proposing to make significant efficiencies next year, which really will go making a really important contribution towards closing that budget gap. So there's cashable efficiency targets of 1.7 million for 25-26, and without those, the budget gap would be obviously 1.7 million pounds higher. Paragraph, so we just talked then a little bit just about inflation and contingencies. And then for this year, it's just worth flagging that the general contingency has been increased somewhat, and part of that links back to some of the points Councillor Price made about the fact that we haven't got any indication of pay rises for any of the staff groups. So it's very hard for us to forecast how much those might be. So that general contingency gives us a bit of a risk mitigation in the event that pay inflation runs at higher than 2%, which we have built in. Paragraph 63 onwards then talks about the medium-term position. And I suppose the key point is that currently this budget, this position suggests that the deficit in this year continues throughout the plan. But I feel like I always say that future forecasting is very challenging, but I think this is even more so the case at the moment with a comprehensive spending review, a review of the fire funding formula. There are some planned changes to business rates, and then there are the impacts of on the fire authority of any of the other changes relating to devolution or local government reorganisation. So it is really difficult to plan too far ahead. But hopefully we should receive a 2-year funding settlement, which would go some way to addressing these concerns for next year. What is really important, though, is that we will continue to horizon scan to look at the impacts of what these changes might mean to the fire authority, but also to look for opportunities to deliver cashable savings as well at the same time. So paragraph 71 onwards, covers the capital programme, And I think it's really positive to note that we continue to invest in these essential capital works, primarily on our estates and on our vehicles, but also with some modest investment continuing for carbon reduction. And there are more details of those programmes in Appendix C1 and Confident and Exempt Appendix C2. Paragraph 82 onwards talks about the reserves position, and there is a little graph that indicates that our committed reserves are continuing to fall, and that is in line with what we had expected because of the delivery of the capital programmes. So in 2022, we had this very high reserve balance, which was largely to do with delays on the vehicles programme. And as those vehicles are now being delivered and benefiting the service, that reserve balance is coming down. The element in orange, which is risk mitigation, is slightly increasing, and that is a measure because of the uncertainty within the position and the forecast deficit. So that is a sort of a prudent measure. And the reserve strategy talks in more detail about the reserves. So the remaining part of the report covers off the Treasury Management Strategy Statement and the Capital Investment Strategy. So there are a couple of points highlighted here about changes on those strategies. And there is also a review of the balance sheet, which has taken place within the exec group, and the Section 25 report, which is a requirement for the Chief Financial Officer to assess the adequacy of the reserves and the robustness of the budget. And short of highlighting the fact that continuing uncertainty continues to make things very difficult, there aren't any particular major concerns to note from that report. And then finally, we are just covering the Financial Management Code and the Insurance Strategy. So I won't propose to go over those in any detail, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. A lot to take in. Can I ask you, the underspend on call firefighters, is some of that going to help the situation in the Isle of Wight?
So the underspend on on-call firefighters sort of forms part of our general underspend, and this year we're proposing to allocate the general underspend to the budget equalisation reserve. But the underspend on on-call firefighters is currently giving us a bit of flexibility within our budget. So should that underspend reduce because of greater recruitment and retention of on-call firefighters, then that would reduce that flexibility. But we would always have time to see that happening. So apart from in the event of some extreme weather conditions, for example, that won't dramatically increase overnight. That would be a gradual increase which we could manage.
So we're not at risk if there's a sudden surge in, or is there likely to be a sudden surge in on-call firefighters?
So I think we would be very pleased if there were suddenly a lot more people available and willing to take up those roles. I think we would have to manage that sudden. We wouldn't suddenly have the capacity to take on hundreds of new recruits overnight. So we would gradually build that up. At the same time, that additional capacity we've got from the on-call firefighters might allow us to look at other things as well. So it's not an imminent danger that it would happen sort of within a couple of months, although obviously it would be great if we did have a sudden influx.
Okay, thank you. Members, Roger.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. The first one is on paragraph 22. There's a national insurance one. Now, when one looks at the figures, as you said, it's just under half, or it's about half, is what we've got to what it's really going to cost us. And I think that we should write as an authority to the Local Government Association and show how much that difference is affecting us. And to see, I will certainly bring it up at the Fire Service Management Committee, but I think with the support of the authority as well, the service, to say that it's quite a big chunk to only get half of it. If you're going to get £10,000 less and it was a 1.2 million, you probably wouldn't be fighting so hard. But when it's half, I think we need to fight this hard to try and get some of that money back. That's the first point. The next one is that on the 24, this small additional pressure has emerged to do with the proposals on contributions to shared team for Dorset, Wiltshire, and Devon and Somerset, on implementation of a national operation guidance. I don't quite understand what that is. If it's national guidance, as I see it, most of the national guidance comes from the Chiefs Council. So why do we have to have a team brought in to help us with the other services to get it right? Can not our own officers do it? I don't understand it.
Just to deal with that one, I think it is a good question. Essentially, all control rooms have a consideration whether they or the service wants to comply with national operational guidance. Now, it's like a code of practice. If you don't, you've got to describe how else you're doing it and why it's better. So we have to comply with we decided we'll comply with the national operational guidance. Now, you can do that yourself. Now, we're in a network control room across Dorset, Wiltshire, Devon and Somerset, and now Kent joined us as well. And so clearly, it is better if we do it together because they could take our calls at any second, because we could pass our calls to them and we could take their calls. That's how the network works. And on the basis of economies of scale, doing it once with a shared team is better than doing it 4 times. So this money which is put in the budget this time is about sharing that cost across all 4 services, which actually is a cheaper way of doing it.
So Kent also should be included in there as well?
Yeah, the cost will go across all 4 services in time, yeah. Yeah, like all I was going to mention this at the end, but a number of proposals that we've been working out for some time, and obviously those conversations will have started in some instances. Some of the areas we're looking at changing have started, others will start at some point in this year. So the agreement of the next item about the service plan will help facilitate that move towards those changes. But just to remind members, some of those changes will not be easy for us to achieve, and they will not be, they'll be relatively contentious for some people.
So there's certainly the assumption these aren't savings that will all be achieved from the 1st of April. So there some of them there's a part year effect of those savings. So we will be monitoring against plans. There is always a risk that some of those savings won't be achieved or won't be achieved by the current timescale, which will be reported back to the authority. But there's also potential that once the plans get developed a bit further, some of the savings might be slightly more. So I think it's a prudent assumption about the level of savings.
Because again, it's quite a large chunk of money. If the government doesn't actually give it to us.
So the pensions grant is a Home Office grant and we haven't been notified of those yet. So I'm anticipating that it will continue at the current level. So no inflationary increase, but the grant will continue. But if not, that would be a significant problem. I would very much hope that a change of that nature wouldn't come quite so late in the day. But until it's confirmed, it's not yet confirmed.
The Firelink grant is that is lower than what we really should be getting, because originally, as I understood it, Firelink was set up a number of years ago, which was going to be fully funded by government, and also the running costs would be no higher than what they were costing us before under the old scheme. But what is really worrying me about these grants is that under successive governments, they promise, but the promises don't materialise. We can look at that in our lives in other ways, but forget that. But as far as we're concerned here, we're not getting what that's being promised. I mean, national insurance, I think the Firelink grant, pensions we're not, there's no certainty of, and that, it just worries me. But those are my comments, that they promised they're going to get the full funding, but we're not getting it. And that is really having quite serious effects on our budgets, because probably if you added up all of those and we got what we wanted, we'd almost have a neutral budget. So it concerns me. But I think the thing which I would like to suggest, as I said earlier on, in the first instance, we do write to the LGA about the National Insurance Grant, and I'd like that added to the recommendations. Thank you. But other than that, a very good report setting out all the financial situation, and I would support the grant, and I think the group would support the grant, as support the budget as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Anybody else? Derek? Derek, please. Yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you, Catherine. Again, first of all, congratulations on whittling down a 6 million, the forecast 6 million deficit we were looking at for 25-26 down to where we are is a tremendous effort, and I'd like to thank you for that. And as always, thank you for the paper. Obviously, when 80% of our expenditure, and Roger's just covered some of this, when 80% of our expenditure is pay-related or linked to personnel costs, one has to look a little bit closer on some of the forecast increases. Are you happy that we'll still be okay if we do get increases way above the 2% that you're forecasting on inflation, pay inflation? Are you happy that we can recover things Roger's touched on, the national insurance? You're working on 50% of the grant. Last year we got a full grant rebate. I don't think we've got it yet, but we're getting a full grant rebate. That is still a chunk of money if it comes down from full to 50%. Are we happy we're going to get these savings in? And are you happy too that the on-call relationship, on-call to full-time is covered in your calculations? That's all the assurance I kind of am seeking at the moment.
So,
and apologies for always having to turn my back on this.
exactly. So I think I am happy that we have got some level of contingency, which would offer some protection against a pay rise that is in excess of what we have budgeted for. I think it would be challenging for the sector as a whole if the pay rise. This is a nationally agreed inflationary assumption. So I think for services as a whole, if it was significantly in excess of that, that would be challenging. We do have other risk reserves set out that would help us manage that in the short term, but it would create a bigger budget gap in the future. In terms of the national insurance increase, we have budgeted for less grant than the costs of the national insurance. So any improvement in that position would improve the position, but that is the amount of grant that we are going to receive, and we're quite confident of our forecasts. So I don't think the position can be any worse than that. And I suppose similarly on the sort of on-call, we are continuing to budget for a higher on-call establishment than we necessarily have at the moment, but as I sort of said, it would take some time for that to change, so that won't change overnight. So we will have time to manage that should we have more on-call firefighters in the future. Does that help?
It does. Sorry. It does. The on-call situation, of course, when we were running about 59% last year, the on-call situation saved us in terms of budget. The saving has been very, very useful. And if we were to outperform on recruiting on-call, we may fall into another problem. On the national insurance, the big issue isn't so much on our own employees. big issue is the supply chain. Now, we do not have much of a supply chain when you're 80% of your costs are linked to the staff, then obviously supply chain is not that important. But have we made allowances for people coming out of contract with us or whatever because they can't? They want renegotiation on so that they can themselves settle their national insurance bills. That's just one question I have on national insurance. But
So
as long as we're happy that we've got contingency, it's the contingency that is my concern on this.
So we have factored in the impact of the NI increase on our shared services partnership costs, which is sort of our single one-off largest supplier.
Yeah.
It's quite straightforward there because we have a very sort of open book, transparent relationship where we understand exactly what we're paying for so we can see the increase. For our commercial suppliers that we're working with, it is a bit harder to tell because there isn't necessarily going to be a direct correlation between their price increases and the national insurance, right? So there are a lot of more complex factors that are that we're looking at there. It could be that we do see increases in things like in some costs from our suppliers, but I think we will have to bring those forward separately for consideration among the exec group, so we can look at those. But we haven't because it's really not clear what the direct impact of price rises in those areas will be. We haven't factored those into the specific service budgets, but hopefully some level of contingency budget would be available for that.
Okay. And my final one, page, was it 61 or para 61? Middle manager review. You don't put an amount down for that. Is that covered? Upwards, downwards, or what? Where was it? Is it para 61, was it? No. It was the previous page, was it? I do apologise. I've just got a new laptop and I can't use touch with it.
Was it one of the three cash flow efficiencies?
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So just to speak to that again, similarly to the crewing changes, looking at our management size and reviewing that, and looking to drive efficiencies where we can. So I almost certainly will be driving higher costs.
Fine, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That my final one was on council tax. Some with the EFS that's gone through, which we were advised of the outcome last week. Hampshire's getting nothing, so we believe. There's lots of appeals going to go in. Some of the councils that do contribute to the precept are very, 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 very rich or very, very broke. Is there any chance you can review the contributions of each borough and district?
So in effect, the way it works is that although the billing authorities sort of gather the council tax as set by the authority, so there is a complete separation between the money that's coming from each of those billing authorities to the fire authority and from that billing authority's own funding. So they set their own precept and raise that. The fire authority's precept is separate. What has been really helpful this year is that the tax base has increased significantly, particularly on the Isle of Wight and New Forest district councils, because of the introduction of second and empty homes premiums, which will mean that there's additional council tax being raised from that, which, although the decision is made by the billing authority, that flows through to the fire authority. But the way that the billing authority the money is entirely separate, our money and their money, so they are just completely separate. The only way it changes is to do with changes to the tax base, which there isn't actually a great deal of flexibility about normally, but it's just the second and empty homes premium was a new thing.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much indeed, Catherine. Thank you.
David.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Catherine. A really good report and very well explained. My question is about capping. In the case of Hampshire County Council, we have a situation where normally we would expect a cap of 2.99%, but government decided that because of the special pressures of adult social care, children's services, they'd allow an extra 2%. So I think in the case of Hampshire County Council, we're going to have a council tax of 4.99%. So a precedent has been set over and above the usual capping arrangements, which were designed to protect the council taxpayer. In the case of the Fire Authority, it's interesting, isn't it, that once again they've sort of gone against the precedent, and they've allowed us, they haven't been generous overall, but they have allowed us a little bit more flexibility to go to just over 6%. What is the rationale in the case of the Fire Authority? Do you understand government's thinking? And will this be a and will this be just a 1 year thing, or is there some sort of into the future commitment?
So I do think that some of the change to the council tax referendum limit for fire authorities was as a result of the fire sector explaining the pressures that are being faced, and so there are some particular things that affect fire and rescue services differently to the rest of local government. The £5 increase is incredibly helpful for us because we are a relatively low council tax setting authority, whereas for some authorities where their council tax is already higher, the £5 is actually very little more than 2.99% actually. So whereas for us, because our council tax is relatively low, it is a bigger increase. It is the rationale for it being £5, I'm not 100% clear on, although I know that districts have also in the past had the ability to raise council tax by £5 or 2.99%, whichever is higher. So I think it probably comes from there. I do think there probably is hopefully in the future, there might be some thoughts about how to make this more sustainable, because the percentage increase for £5 will decrease every year, but it also is unhelpful to know until very late in the day whether it will be 2.99% or £5. So hopefully the 2-year comprehensive spending review will give us a bit more of an indication of what's a suitable level. But yeah, it's £5 is very good for us as a low council tax authority.
Chief, did you want to say something? Okay. Catherine, thank you. Excellent report. David Drew.
Yes, that's me, Chairman.
Go.
Just to pick up on the £5 one as a bit of information, factoid if you like, that I know Test Valley were just below the 3% threshold, and therefore we were applying £5, and then once we got to that point, it became a percentage rather than £5. So it's helpful if we are allowed to raise by £5. I think that would be good. But also thinking about the billing authorities, another question that was asked. Do we provide a leaflet to them? Because I can't remember when my council tax last arrived, to explain what the fire authority is doing with their money. Is that something that gets printed off and distributed with our council? So I know all the local authorities do, and I'm just wondering if I think the police do as well, so we probably do. But Catherine, a great report, thank you very much, and also a very comprehensive, as ever, detailed comprehension, clearly demonstrating a total understanding of what you're saying to us. So thank you for that. Another question that I wanted to pick up was on Roger's point about writing to the LGA. Happy to do that, to raise concerns and present facts, but I'm not quite clear on exactly what we're going to put in that. That might be worth clarifying before we agree to do that. And also, I found it quite depressing reading what is it? Arling Close report on the economy and other references to where things were going. Growth is key. I know that's a big picture, talking about the economic growth of the country, but all of us are subject to the impact of that, and the more growth we can get, the better it is for the pensions, etc., etc. And I think my last point, my penultimate point, was going to be about uncertainty. Is it something that we want to build in more frequent updates from the finance team? I can't remember how often you do. I think you do them every meeting we have anyway. So that would be good to make sure that we get an update on that specifically, because yes, clearly there's a lot more uncertainty. And the other point, Chairman, is just an observation about how central government might want to deal with all authorities, in that any that have any reserves, if I was central government and knowing that I was short of cash, I'd want to ensure that the local authorities that I had some control over were down to the bare minimum before I started throwing any more money at them, which is exactly the situation I think we've had on Hampshire. I think they can see that we've probably haven't had the budget yet, got reserves to get through this coming year, but not the next. And that's what I would do. So I think it's unsurprising that they're expecting us to run down the reserves to pretty much the bare minimum, because they can always turn a tap on if they so chose. Sorry, that's just sort of a practical observation, I think, on that one. But the letter, I think we ought to know what we're going to put into that.
Okay, Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw out the national insurance conversation, because I think most people, have experienced it within their life and maybe within their business. But I think from a public sector perspective and the uncertainty of the years to come, I just want to put some figures into perspective. Obviously, you said the grant or support was 50%. So therefore, it left a deficit around about 670. That we needed to make up because of the national insurance increases. And extremely well done in obviously reducing the deficit that we're now at 1.8 million deficit. But obviously that shortfall would have been largely reduced without the 670 odd national insurance shortfall from the grant. And the contingency that you might have put in from the second-hand impact of it from suppliers that you've put in of your 1.1 million contingency plan, which I know isn't all taken up from a national insurance contingency. It is also pay and other contingency, but there is obviously a proportion within that. And obviously the good work that you've done with the 1.7 million efficiency savings, which again has sort of been counteracted with the national insurance deficit. My question is obviously we had a 50% grant, and I'm not sure any of us can answer this, and it maybe goes on from David's question of what is the uncertainty the year ahead, because effectively that could be a reoccurring deficit, if not a full 100% national insurance deficit.
So my understanding is that although we have listed it separately on the report for transparency, it will become part of the revenue support grant, national insurance. So in effect, that gets subsumed into another number. I do think it's sensible for us to continue to make the point that the number is insufficient this year, but if nothing changes, that number, that shortfall gets rolled forward into the position and remains forever, and then changes to revenue support grant. Once it becomes part of revenue support grant, it is no longer for national insurance, it's just part of a grant. So I think we definitely need to make sure that we keep an eye on that, because in theory, for example, that would go up by CPI in September, whereas if our wages go up by a different amount, that increases that shortfall, but it sort of loses its identity in the future.
Just the question about my
David,
question about the leaflet.
please.
It was just. Thank you, Chairman. It's just the question about the leaflet. Do we have one that goes out
So
with the council taxes? From
when
the
the billing authorities issue their council tax leaflets, they include information about sort of their for a two-tier authority, the county and the district, and for unitaries, the unitary authority precept, the police precept and the fire precept. We largely link towards a particular part of our website where we then have that information about how are we funded, how do we spend our budget, and link to some key information. But it isn't a specific separate leaflet, it's just a link to further information should people want it. And I'm fairly sure that if people wanted, we would send them more information if they requested it and they weren't able to access it online.
Just, Chairman, to come back on that, as a general principle, I think it's quite useful that it's one opportunity a year to keep in touch with residents when they're almost certainly going to open the letter that's got the council tax bill. And I know that as local authorities, we put something in that letter to say what we're spending it on. I just feel it would be worth spending a few pence on a bit of paper that we put in that with that to give residents a very short overview of where their money for the fire authority is going. Thank you.
Roger.
You should not have pressed that.
I turn. Right. The point about the letter to the LGA, what I'd like us to do is point out to them that the government's promise was 100% national insurance. The national insurance was is going to cost us X, and the grant is only Y. Therefore, it being only 50% of what was promised, and therefore that the LGA should take this up with government, because there is a need to pay the whole lot. And as has been said, that will then be accumulative. It will knock on, because if you don't get the right figure in the grant this year as a one-off, when it goes into the main grant, you're never going to get it then. So you're going to always be that amount short, and it will get greater because of inflation and everything else. So I think it's important, as I say, if there's a letter in from the authority, then I will also ask and take it up at the Fire Service Management Committee, which is on the 10th of March. So I will take it up then and see what we can do. I mean, if we don't make a fuss about it, then we're never going to get it. Government's just going to sit back and say, OK, they've accepted it. On the other point about leaflets, we always used to do a separate fire leaflet many years ago. And I can't remember what the cost of it was, but it is quite costly printing, I don't know how many leaflets, for every house across the county in the Isle of Wight. So it's a balance. Do we do enough publicity? Do we get it right during the course of the year in getting our information across to the public, or do we need to do it? I know the police do it, as you've said, David, but that, careful what I say here. That's more of a publicity stunt than real fact, I think. And we would put ours out with fact, and that's what it used to do. But I think there's a question about the cost of it. So I think it needs to be looked at, but I wouldn't push to have it done.
And we will get a letter together. Louise.
No, the leaflet. I'm not really proposing we looking at. I'm quite happy as it is, because I think over time the officers need to look at, do we get all the information out we need to? If we do, we don't need to do it, because it's very difficult to pull something like this together now, ready to go out. So I would guess this year let it go, but look at it possibly for the future.
How kind of you. Thank you. Louise.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to actually raise further the concept of highlighting to government our problems. And though I think it's great that we write to the Local Government Association, I actually think we need that letter to go to the Minister, the Fire Minister, because I think it's when the people in the House get to hear what's going on. I think that we can then, we've got like a two-pronged attack if they're seeing it come onto their desk. So I'd like that letter to also be sent slightly further, because as a group we can raise it to the LGA with everybody else, but also if it hits a minister's desk and they see that there is problems and what that might be stacking up for the future, maybe we will get a little bit further. So that's all I wanted to suggest, that is it the Dame, I can't think of her name, but anyway, the Fire Minister and the relevant department.
Thank you, Louise. It will be done.
But in addition, I wanted to say how really well laid out this report was, because I was completely new to the fire authority, and so this is really my first time properly understanding it, and I think a tremendous amount of work has gone in to get us to a really good position given the situation and circumstances we are facing because of changes by national government. So I think it's to be very much commended, the officers, for all their hard work. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Catherine. Any more? Sally?
Just going back to putting a leaflet inside the council tax bills. I know at Southampton we're trying to go paperless now, just because, like everything, we're trying to save money. So I'm not sure, maybe it's an end of an era for leaflets going in council tax letters. So we probably need to think maybe differently. I know Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue have got a really great social media page. Maybe put something on there to say if you're interested, this is how we're spending our money. Just thought I'd add that.
Okay, thank you. David Drew, again.
For coming back on this one again, but I was thinking on the fly, which is always dangerous. But if local authorities are going paperless, that's an opportunity for us to liaise with the billing authorities, which we have to do anyway, to ask them if they can include in their paperless communications web links, etc. And again, if local authorities are billing with their paper, because I don't know what the law is with regard to sending bills out. It may be that they have to send a paper one out. But if they're producing something, perhaps we could piggyback on what they do, just as a sort of for more information about the fire, because that would be much less expensive. Just, as I said, dangerously thinking on the hoof, Chairman, to try and achieve an end.
Never works. Okay, any more? Yes, George.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's nice to see a budget so sensible and one that we all agree on. It's really good. I hope for the same luck in a couple of weeks in my own authority, but don't hold much hope. However, yeah, looking on the flyer thing, I think I don't think necessarily it's an advertised employee of the Police and Crime Commissioner. I do think it sometimes is useful information. And I think it's also a reminder that we have a Police and Crime Commissioner. I think, from a political aspect, I think there's still a large population in Hampshire that don't actually understand what a Police and Crime Commissioner role is, or that it even exists. Many a time I've come across residents that don't even know about the role of a Police and Crime Commissioner. So I think it's a nice reminder. I think that putting a flyer out for the Fire Authority would be a nice idea in principle. I think there would be a huge cost element. I think we looked at something across Hampshire last year, and it was like £120,000 for the printing of a singular flyer, without distribution costs across the whole of Hampshire. However, we talking about obviously the future and how obviously things are digitising, they are, but obviously we still need to remember there is a certain demographic who still can't use a computer. But getting the information out to them is still important. And I think one of the things that our authority is slightly looking into is sending out a kind of like a one-time letter, which could be useful for the Fire Authority in a future date, to notify people that we are trying to go paperless, and if people would like updates, there's alternative methods, and allowing people to sign up to those methods. So, for example, text alerts are very inexpensive, email alerts are very inexpensive, so that they could get a yearly or bi-yearly update from the Fire Authority via a digital method. And I understand that we're already promoting those on social media, but I'm on about getting a letter through every door for people that don't see social media naturally. There's a lot of people that don't see it. So it might be an idea, not for this meeting now, but in the future, to look at it, because I think it's a really good idea that the Fire Authority does not promote itself, but make sure that we're the awareness of the public that are paying, obviously, their tax towards our authority. And I think that we do some really good work, and we should highlight that. And it also gives the people the benefit, if there is elderly people that haven't got technological benefits, it gives them the ability to kind of write back to us and say, I don't have access to this, can I receive information physically still? And we can send them out inexpensively a couple of updates. So if there is people out there in Hampshire and Isle of Wight that are interested in fire updates, we can provide that service to them without kind of cutting them out and just making it all about social media. So maybe that's something that we should bring back and discuss at a future date, because I think it would be useful.
Can I just come back and say it's actually a choice at Southampton City Council at the moment. We're not making everybody go paperless, because there are obviously those that are on digital and don't have smartphones and things like that. So yeah, we've not made everybody go paperless. You can sign up to it at the moment.
Okay, so what we're saying is yes to a letter to the Minister, and we will have a look at the cost of a leaflet. Okay?
The Minister and the LGA.
And the LGA. Yeah. Okay, so if there's no more, let me alert you to the recommendation for this paper, which is on page 2 of your new supplement, which was added. And it goes on forever. So, the recommendation is that the items listed below at paragraphs 12A and B are noted by the full authority. The 24-25 monitoring position and forecast outrun of the year, and the efficiency plan as set out in Appendix H. That the items listed below in paragraph 13A to N be approved by the full authority, namely the revenue budget 25-26, including a draw from the budget equalisation reserve of 1.813 million to balance the budget as set out in Annex 1 of this addendum. The revised revenue budget for 24-25 as set out in Appendix A2. The contribution of unused contingencies and additional investment income of 1.838 million to the budget equalisation reserve. The principle that if there is an underspend at year end on the revenue budget for 24-25, as is currently projected, any underspend will be contributed to the budget equalisation reserve with the actual amount to be confirmed and approved as part of the outturned report to the authority. The medium-term financial plan as set out in Annex 2 of this addendum. The capital programme and funding as set out in Appendix C1 and Exempt C2. The reserve strategy as set out in Annex 3 to this addendum. The Treasury Management Strategy Statement of 25-26 and the remainder of 24-25 as set out in Appendix E. That the authority is delegated to the Chief Financial Officer to manage the authority's investments and borrowing according to the Treasury Management Strategy Statement as appropriate. The capital and investment strategy for 25-26 and the remainder of 24-25 as set out in Appendix F, including the required prudential indicators. The Section 25 report as set out in Appendix G, which should be taken into account by the authority in agreeing the budget and council tax. The council tax requirement as the authority for the authority for the year ending 1st of April 25 of 64,015,034. That the authority's council tax to be increased by £5 or 6.04% for a Band D property for the year beginning April the 1st, 2025, and that the authority's council tax be for the year beginning 25-26 for properties in each tax band will therefore be Band A, £58.56, Band B, 68.32, Band C, 78.08, Band D, 87.84, Band E, 107.36, Band F, 126.88, Band G, 146.40, and Band H, 175 and 68p. And lastly, that the precepts totalling 64,015,034 are issued on the billing authority in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as set out below, requiring the payment in such instalments and on such dates set by them and previously notified to the authority in proportion to the tax base of each billing authority area as determined by them. And then that figure of the billing authority on the next page, which I'm running out of puff. With your permission, no.
We'll take 12 first, because that's to note, and the rest of us to approve.
Sorry?
Take 12 first,
Yeah.
just to note rather than to approve.
Yeah. Okay. 12 first. Yes. Okay. And the rest noted? Approved. Approved. Approved.
The letter should be in the recommendations that we're going to do.
Yep. Okay.
And the letter.
And the letter? Approved?
Yeah.
Agreed. Phew. Good. Chief, you'd like to say something?
Give you a moment to rest your vocal cords, Chairman. Members, thank you, and thank you to Catherine, as you've already mentioned. I just wanted to say a few words now you've made your decision on those issues. Just to draw a few comments out, and my thanks to the directors here and indeed Catherine, because you notice the current spend profile, although we've got the rest of the year to go, is within 1% of the budget, which by any count is an impressive, given a pretty volatile year, an impressive outcome by directors managing spend through the year. And this year, on these approvals, will be no less challenging in terms of the work we have to do to make sure that we come in line with your budget expectations. We will, as has been mentioned, report to you regularly and really highlight any exceptions to your direction you've set us. I guess I wanted to point out not only the challenges of the year, but also given the CSR round we face, the fire sector has an opportunity to be much more assertive in this stance, and I think it's one of those things I would recommend strongly to you as a fire authority, and being assertive around the future funding for services. I approach my 34th year in the sector, and I've never quite seen such difficult times for this fire and rescue service sector. I've led a lot of change, a lot of efficiency drives in my time, and I think we are now approaching a time where we are simply having to remove cost because you can't afford it. And that's what we face in the coming year, perhaps in places. So given the government's position on their kind of spending power phrase, they'll claim 3.67% would be our spending power increase. But when you then take into account the reduction of offsetting the national insurance, it takes us much down towards 3%. And then you consider ongoing or no capital funding and the capital investment that we are having to make in our estate. And we have some of the most kept together estates in the country. I'm hearing stories across the country of rat-infested fire stations, writing off fire engines and things like that. So we are not in that position, but we still have a lot of money to spend on our estate, and we're doing well in that regard. But it all costs money, which isn't funded anywhere else. So even given a slight increase in spending power, we're finding a much higher increase in spending need across our range. And none of that is about operational response capability. We're not getting more response capability. You're barely keeping the same. And that's the thing that concerns me most as your Chief Officer. So the CSR is an opportunity for us to really position ourselves, amongst other fire and rescue services, which I know the LGA and the NFCC are now gearing up for. In fact, they're drafting things as we speak to go into the CSR round. But as we set our budget this year, I think it gives us an opportunity to really position ourselves much more strongly. We're having to do things this year that we'd rather not do. We're having to do things which will change our ability to serve the public quite as well as we did. And that's given the budget we've got now. The future looks even less convincing in terms of being able to continue to thrive as an organisation, protecting the people as we have done over many years. So I guess my ask is that we consider, when we hear on the TV or the radio or whatever, that there's been a big increase in spending power, that we resist that fact. When we hear that we've had the offset national insurance changes by grants, we resist that fact. That's just not the case. I'm not saying anyone would lie, but these become stated facts in the press and media, and we need to push back hard to say that's just not the case. We are up against it. Success in this regard goes back to Councillor Harrison's question earlier. Success in this regard comes from lobbying, comes from fact-checking, comes from challenging back on the actual facts. Now, this may sound, unusually for me, a bit political what I'm saying here, but I don't mean it to be that way. I'm simply stating the challenges us officers will have in keeping that budget set within 1% next year, given the challenges we face this. So I'm laying out perhaps a check and balance for you. I will keep you informed about the changes as they emerge in the development of our proposals. Some of those will be decisions that we've made by me or by the officers in terms of the delegation of powers, but I want you to understand what those decisions are made, because they will have an effect on your constituents, they'll have an effect on your inbox, they'll have an effect on politics as well. So whilst I'll try and insulate you from the actual decisions, because I think that's all right proper, that's in very much the feeling of our constitution and indeed government's wishes, but equally I need you to understand why we're doing the things we're doing and make sure you're well sighted on those issues as we go forward. So thank you for your support in terms of counter-tax. I appreciate that's our hard-working individuals out there in your constituencies as well as our communities. But I think we'll make sure we demonstrate how much value we are to those constituencies, as well as how we're making sure we're driving efficiencies as hard as we can, and are really honest with our communities about when we have to stop doing something because we cannot afford it. So I'm grateful for your support, grateful for the director's hard work in making sure the money is spent well, And we look forward to another challenging year, but one that we need to make a loud noise about. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 8, which is the Authority Safety Plan 25 to 30, which is on page 115 of your paperwork. And I would invite Chancellor Dickinson to present, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. I'm extremely pleased to be presenting to you for your approval the 2025 to 2030 Safety Plan. The Safety Plan is your medium-term plan for the service, which sets out our promise, our offer to the communities that we serve across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And the plan that you have in front of you at Appendix A, so the slightly more colourful document and the report itself, represents months of detailed work by our teams in terms of risk analysis, engagement across all our colleagues, and critically collaboration with partner organisations, as well as, of course, as our public consultation. So in 2023, we started our work to understand the specific risks and opportunities in respect of public safety, which affects our communities, and we conducted our community risk management planning. So this is something we did that was in full compliance with the fire standard, and we wanted to get a real independent sense of how we were doing that. So we sought external input and peer review by other fire and rescue services that are leading the sector in this work. So that understanding of the risks and the opportunities we refer to as stage 1. And then we moved into stage 2 last year after you approved stage 1 in 2023, where we developed mitigations to those risks and issues. And over last summer, so over the summer of 24, we developed the early drafts of the safety plan document, and we had a number of scrutiny sessions and, of course, the sign-off by yourselves in October to proceed to the 10-week public consultation. And that consultation, we really enjoyed a record volume of responses to our proposals. It set such a high bar. We had 35% more responses than we had in previous public consultations, which amounted to 1,592. And what was really pleasing about that, I mean, you obviously have within the safety plan document itself more detail on the public survey, who we spoke to, how we did it, what they said, etc. But we had some really high participation in groups that previously hadn't participated to such an extent. So, for example, young people, who number 28% of our local population, were 27% of our consultation uptake. So the plan in front of you proposes 5 strategic objectives, and going back to the cover report, paragraph 17 bullets each of those and gives some objectives below them, indicating what the service will do over this year coming, over the first year of the plan, to progress against these. So an example being the first one, protecting people who protecting people, especially those who need it most. There's lots of activity that's going to take place in that area, building, of course, on what we do already, and particularly in reference to some of the discussions in the last item in the budget report around the value of demonstrating what the fire authority, what the service do to our public, and having that engagement. One of the things specifically that we're going to do is set up a people's panel, following in the lines of some of the unitaries, to really get much deeper ongoing insight to what people are experiencing, what people want, etc. In terms of the 5 strategic objectives, each of them is equally as important as the next, and they will all be progressed along a similar timeline to fulfil our core purpose of making life safer in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So the overarching safety plan, which of course is public facing, is then threaded down through the directorate's plans and down into the individuals level, so within individuals' performance development reviews. So we really see that golden thread right from the organisational contract, the offer to the public, down to an individual staff member's contribution to making life safer. The community risk management planning, it's an iterative process that's going to be woven into our annual business planning cycle. So whilst this plan has a life of 5 years, and in 5 years' time we'll, bring another medium-term plan, every year we'll be reviewing its relevance, what we're doing against it to ensure that it stays fit for purpose. And in terms of how we also will report to you in terms of our performance against that, that will be through our normal performance reporting. So just to conclude, the safety plan is absolutely fundamental to why and how we operate as a fire and rescue service, and the CRMP ensures that the services that we deliver to our community are needed, are planned, they have a really sound rationale, and really critically a mandate from the public in terms of those we serve. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Shantha. Members. David.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a big well done from me. I was particularly struck by the amount of engagement that you've had through consultation, often with organisations I've been involved in. Sometimes working with partners has seemed, shall I say, a bit of an uphill struggle because partners have their own separate agendas and maybe at times they're less than enthusiastic about engaging with us and our agenda. So the fact that you've done it and you've done it so well is great credit to you. And I'm also appreciative of the fact that improving community safety isn't just something that the fire service or the fire authority should be concerned about. It will only work with the help of all our partners. So it works both at the front end and at the end of it. So really well done. I think it's an exemplar piece of work.
Thank you, David. Any more? David Drew.
Actually, well, I'll echo what the other David, the two Davids are speaking, saying the same, saying double trouble. No, not at all. Speaking from the same place. It is great that there's been so much engagement, and I know that I was trying to motivate a lot of the parish councils that I was seeing by saying, "Come on, guys! The youth are really storming ahead with the engagement here, to try and sort of prompt, provoke, encourage them to feedback." And the 35% up, I think that we should be setting targets to continue to get the public to recognise and to communicate with us whenever we need it. And yes, great report as well. I think it looks good. I think it's been round the loop once or twice, which is great, and that's always helpful because I think as part-timers it helps us to see the same broad document evolve, and it gives us confidence that it's been taken forwards and anything that we've said previously has been incorporated. So yeah, well done, great document. I guess the question would be is where are we going to publish this? Back to my theme on publicity.
So being as environmentally conscious as possible, it will be available on our website to the public, but I'm also keen that we do have a small amount of printed copies that we can use on a tailored basis because it's an important document as well to also have a limited supply in hard copy. But certainly pending the Fire Authority's approval of this, we've got a communications plan both internally and externally to sort of launch it. So whilst it will go onto our website, I imagine we'd leverage our social media and other sort of channels to kind of get it out there.
Great, thank you.
Roger and then Karen. Karen, then Roger.
What a gent you are. Thank you very much. We've spoken about flooding quite a bit recently, and I have to bring it up really. So, government have just bought out 2.6 billion because they reckon it's going to be 1 in 4 houses that are flooded by 2050. So have we touched on that in here?
Absolutely. So within the, can refer you to the assessment of risk, where we looked at all of the sort of typical risks within area. And some of the work that, so you'll see that obviously rescues with respect to water and flooding is high up in terms of the likelihood. So there's very much a need for it. But I think coming back to the sort of earlier point from Councillor Harrison around working with partner organisations, I think the challenge that we have is, and the opportunity that we have in terms of place, is really working with other partners to kind of look at the effects of things like flooding, etc., and work to mitigate those.
I was really thinking about in terms of the expectations of the public when it comes to it and what work we're doing around that. Because I'm often told, oh, Hampshire and Isle of Wight don't do what everybody else does in the whole of the other part of the UK. So I just wondered what you've got to say about that. Thank you. And if we could do some education, actually.
So kind of our response in terms of flooding, somewhat obviously the rescues part is within our role, but some of it sort of sits outside. So there is a big piece of work to do in terms of perhaps resetting what the public's expectation is and what we can do.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Just and adding to that point, there is a continual lobby in England for FRS, Fire and Rescue Services, to be statutory obliged to deal with flooding. We're not a statutory, it's not a statutory requirement of us. Obviously, we'll always use our capacity to assist our communities best we can. Equally, there is something about, I know in some of these circumstances that you may have been referred to, certainly members sometimes get in their inbox concerns that we weren't pumping water. In many of those occasions, we're pumping against the tide. And I think King Canute showed that he couldn't do that. It doesn't really work. So we'll always, that's not to diminish the real problems people are having when they get flooded. We can help by clear their houses, we can help by getting involved, but pumping is just not an option in some of those instances. So our fire engines are designed to deliver fire water to the scene of a fire. They do lift water, but they're not very good at it compared to big commercial pumps, which the Environment Agency have.
Chief, that was really interesting. You say you can get involved, because one thing I've had brought up, you're trained to walk in flood waters, etc., and probably one of the only people that are. So actually, in this scenario that I'm talking about, which we've spoken about before, I think that's what people wanted, just a bit of help, because it was so bad, and that wasn't forthcoming.
And I was asked by a county councillor, do we provide waders? No, we don't. Go to a fly fisher shop if you want waders. Roger.
I don't know whether we do put this document in the libraries, and if not, can we do so? Because that's a place where people will go to and look for references and such stuff.
That's an excellent suggestion. We'll take that away, and I'll ensure that's wrapped into our plan.
I would like this document sent to all county councillors. They should see what their fire service does for them. And can you do that, Katie? And then if you send it to the unitaries, they can disperse it as...
I was going to say I have to report back to
I mean, I would like it because I
councillors on
send
the
it to my
city.
parish councils, because that's a very good way of getting it down to the level of the people on the street. Is that all right, Katie? Who's next?
Does that mean we're going to get a link? Is that can we get emailed the link so then we can dish it out that way? Brilliant.
Yeah. Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it most probably follows on. Well done. I think the representation of the responses is far-reaching, I think, which is what you want from a proportion of the community to make sure some of the things that are coming through. On page 7 of the actual safety plan itself and page 8 and 9, obviously it talks about key themes, and climate change was one of the concerns, following on from what Karen was saying, of obviously flooding. But just being mindful of the conversation that we just had regarding budget, and obviously one of the concerns of the impacts of budget and efficiency savings within the authority, and most probably that feeling of being safe and understanding that. And then when you look at the other themes split between external and internal on page 8 and 9, where it looks at more, I suppose, themes on a communication level. I think sort of going back to what you were saying, Karen, I think it's looking at those and making sure that we communicate our financial position and lobby, but also obviously communicate that the most vulnerable and those that need protected are still protected, and have that balance in communication. And I think that goes the same with flooding. You know, the four themes there of budget cuts, to lithium batteries and climate and housing development. And I know we've had those themes for the last few years, and so it looks like they're not necessarily going away. But the fact that they are maybe still a strong theme means that maybe we need to do a little bit more work regarding communication in those areas.
Louise, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the plan. I wanted to turn my attention more to the implementation and the reporting framework, because we don't really touch on that, because everybody is wowed by how much we have in the plan, and that's brilliant. But I think our communities will also want to know how we are performing. So can we have some reassurance, really, that the implementation and reporting framework will be somehow linked electronically to this, so that if residents want to see how we are progressing as a service and what is being fulfilled, they've got a way of being able to identify that progress. So that's just what I'd like to know. Could we link it so that we don't just see the plan, we can see the outcomes and progress? Thank you.
No, we can absolutely do that. Obviously, the performance report comes to the authority at the mid-year point and the end-of-year point, and that describes everything that we're doing in terms of our performance, and obviously the safety plan is fundamental to that, so we can link to that. We can also explain a little bit more if it's not immediately clear, so thinking back to our website and our transparency pages around performance, which we can just assure you of that. And I think as well to kind of place on record as well in terms of the conversations that some members of the Fire Authority have in terms of their the performance appraisal of the Chief Fire Officer, because obviously that, that forms part of, in terms of the Chief Fire Officer being accountable for delivering the safety plan. So kind of those conversations also take place as well. And as well, like I mentioned previously, it is a beautiful glossy document, but it's really important to stress it doesn't end there, because that, is threaded all the way through, right down to all of our individual team members. And it's really important that when we go and launch this at the start of April, our teams who have been involved in the, in the engagement and in the development of it understand what their contribution is to that. I mean, in a recent pulse survey that we ran, well over 80% of our staff described how proud they were to work for our organisation. So it's really important for that pride to be kind of backed up by knowledge in terms of how I as an individual contribute to making Hampshire and the Isle of Wight safer through my bit in the safety plan.
Any more? Derek, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to, well, first of all, Shanta, superb paper. Couple of items. I can't find it on the pages, actually, and my screen I've no longer got touch screen. So can I just ask about the bit you put in about the growing population, the elderly population, and the preventative stuff we have to do considering the population? You say over 70. The figures we work on is over 85, the age of over 85, because they're generally deemed to be, shall we say, a little less, not in my case, a little less mobile than the rest. This is quite important, it's just to go back to David's item when we were talking about the budget. It's the social care costs, David, that's the capping issue. And again, the amount of money we're having to spend on preventative action for the old people is quite important. So that was just one observation. The other one, I'd just like to point out on the corporate governance side, Shanta, Louise, you're asking for reassurance. I can assure you that the questioning that goes on at A&G by internal audit, the internal audit progress reports that come out every quarter and monitor every item that's laid out, and it's an impressive performance. As to why we don't publish that impressive performance is something else, but it is quite strong. In my opinion anyway, I don't know what the officers feel, the reassurance that's done now is quite strong.
Okay, thank you. Katie, when you send this out, could you also include the Lord Lieutenant and the Police and Crime Commissioner? Please. I'm sure she'd like to see it. Thank you. Right, if there's no more, members, may I draw your attention to the recommendation, which is on page 116 of your paperwork, that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authority, should be Fire and Rescue Authority, approves the authority's safety plan for 25 to 30, that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority approves the proposed implementation and reporting framework for the safety plan 2025 to 2030. Approved? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to item 9 on page 143 of your papers, which is the authority's policy framework, corporate governance policy, and review of position statements. If I could ask Matt to present this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. So this report is the last of a series of reports that the authority have received on tidying up our policy framework. So that was an action set by the authority last year for the service to undertake. So this policy combines 3 existing policies, which are outlined in paragraph 3. So there's 3 existing ones merged together to create this one. And also, following comments from the July authority meeting, there have been some minor amendments to the position statements at Appendix B and C, and you can see the track changes are visible on those appendices for ease of what has changed. And then finally, this report seeks some adjustments to the Constitution, and again, these are minor, just to reflect, to make reference to this new procedure, and then to remove some duplication that again is outlined in the report for members. So just for background, paragraph 19 summarises the authority policy framework, which you approved previously, and this outlines all of the policies held by the authority, of which this is the last one to come to you for formal approval. In paragraph I just want to point out, in paragraph 37, there is a slight typo, so my apologies for that. The position statement for fire safety is not at Appendix B, it's at Appendix C, but it's correct in the recommendations, but it just refers to the wrong appendix in there. In terms of the governance policy itself, I'll take questions if you have any. And Appendix B, I just wanted to highlight the changes, and that's on page 159 of your packs. And you will see the changes and track changes there around sprinklers and higher instead of high risk premises. And you'll also see in Appendix C on page 164 the amendment to the fire safety position statement, which is again in red at the bottom half of page 164. So hopefully self-explanatory. Happy to take questions should members have them on the policy and statements.
Thank you, Matt. Good stuff. Roger.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I mean, I'd like to go straight to the position statements. The governance one I have no problem with whatsoever, but it's the sprinklers. I have major problems with them, I'm afraid. First of all, I'd like to ask the question, is sprinklers the right word nowadays? Because I think there's all sorts of systems that can be used. There's misting systems, whereas one thinks of a sprinkler as spraying water down, like a watering can sort of thing. So I just wonder if it's the right word. I agree with the first part in page 159 where the changes are, but when we come to 161, sprinklers in domestic premises, I'm afraid the wording there I personally can't agree with. I think that all new homes should have sprinklers. New build should have sprinklers. It says here, we will recommend that sprinklers should be installed in the homes of those residents who are most vulnerable. Yes, agreed. But when you've got new build, you don't know who's going to go in there. The only way you're going to achieve that is by retrospective fitting. And I think retrospective fitting is a different issue to when the houses are built in the first place. So I cannot agree with that one at all. I do have a comment on the next one, but I'd like to deal with the sprinkler stroke whatever first.
So I think either I'll pass to the Chief or Rob, but obviously the wording other than the red bit has been previously approved by the Fire Authority, and it may warrant a conversation at APAG perhaps, but I'll pass on to others.
If I can just say, we've been discussing this for years and years and years. When Royston was chairman of the Fire Authority, and that's going back quite a few years, we were discussing it then, and we had, I don't think it was probably the current wording, but there was wording then that was put in. But I think we've should have gone along further along the line than what we have since that time.
So, yeah, and do you know, Roger, it was 2012. It was like the first paper I laid in front of the Fire Authority when I joined Hampshire. So I do recall it very fondly. So I think it's fair to say you've been consistent with your views ever since. And I think it's fair to say also that others would probably support your position on the domestic sprinklers. The challenge we have is most of the recommendations made to the government don't support that in as much as the economic case. That said, of course, being the fire service, we'd want sprinklers everywhere. But I think where we agreed last time was that it was the best position we could probably draw on, making it reasonable for people. Otherwise, if we're not careful, the policies would just be ignored by industry. If you can make them reasonable, they may have a chance of picking them up and dealing with them. That said, I'm really happy to take it out today and for a further debate on the broader aspects of this sprinkler policy, position statement, because I think it is worth revisiting, checking for latest recommendations from various quarters with the experiences we've had over the years with places like Grenfell Tower and others. So I think it would be wise to reconsider, but I'm not sure this is the space to do so, if you're in agreement.
I would agree with that. I think it does need a proper debate on that issue. So I'd be quite happy if members agreed to withdraw this particular one from the agenda and to bring it back and discuss the whole principle of sprinklers or suppression, whatever the right word is these days, in the future. But not too long a future. Because as Neil has said, it was 2012. I couldn't remember the year.
I wonder if I would offer a suggestion. Bear in mind, these are minor adjustments for today's purposes, so that the current existing statement isn't out of date. We agree it today, but also make the recommendation or agree that we will come and review, because you're not reviewing the words which have been adjusted. You're reviewing the general context. Otherwise, the extant sprinkler position statement remains as it is. You'd have to decide not to have one to make this go away.
Yeah, I would agree on that basis, but I would say that the debate should be held within 3 months.
Yes, Chairman, I think there's a danger that we might be sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. It would probably be better to agree the paper that we've got today. Also agree to discuss it at the next APAG. We might conclude that actually, rather than the word sprinklers, automatic fire suppressant system might be a more appropriate usage. But I look forward, yes, well, I look forward to the debate with fellow members.
Sorry, I don't want to sound like a pedant. I just wanted, because some of this is about some of the amendments to the Constitution, I just wanted to alert the author that they've duplicated a sentence, so they might want to delete that. On page 150 in the box, we have C2 under risk management, and it says C2, and then halfway through that sentence it refers to C3, and then we have bullet point C3 underneath. So you might want to delete that before you update your document, if that's helpful.
Thank you for that. Yes, we'll pick that up. Yeah.
Thank you.
So important. We've said it.
The other one I'd like to raise is the fire safety advice. Somewhere in the back of my mind, we were working with the Blue Light organisation when they went into a property. They did give fire advice as well, I think. So I wonder whether that ought to be mentioned in here as well, so as that it does link the two together.
I assume you're referring to the Blue Lamp Trust. The only issue is, of course, we can't set policy or positions for them, but they do assist us with some of our home safety referrals and visits. So we can make them aware of your position and ask them to consider aligning themselves with it.
David.
Just a very quick one on, again, sorry, thinking on the hoof, which I obviously shouldn't be doing, but I know. Yes. Sorry. I'll try and. Yeah. It's the sprinkler one. If we're going to have a discussion about that, then could we have some information about where most fires start in a domestic property? That may be obvious already, but there may be a sensible compromise. I was thinking, if they were in the kitchen, for example, if that's where most fires start, that would be quite easy. If you have to do it throughout the whole property, as the chief says, that might be an overburden, and then it doesn't happen at all. So some information on that, if we're going to have the debate, would be great. Thank you.
Right, if we can move to the recommendations, please, which are on page 144 of your paperwork. What's with the recommendations this meeting? They've gone forever. Right. Recommendations being that the corporate governance policy, Appendix A, be approved by the authority for inclusion into the authority's policy framework. That the three policies, risk management policy, anti-theft, fraud, bribery, and corruption policy, and a sponsorship, charity support, and partnership policy, be removed from the authority's policy framework, as they are now superseded by the corporate governance policy, and that this be approved by the full authority. That the minor amendment to the position statement for sprinklers, Appendix B, that forms part of the protection policy, be approved by the full authority. That the minor amendment to the position statement on fire safety advice, Appendix C, that forms part of the protection policy, be approved by the full authority, and that the minor amendments to the Constitution as described at paragraphs 40, 41, 42 are approved by the full authority to align with the recent updates to the authority's policy framework and remove references to superseded policies. Do we approve?
Should we add under 8 that it's going to come back for discussion? We're approving it, but it's going to come back. So
to be discussed at a later date?
Yeah. So as it's recorded, it's going to come back to us. Yeah.
To be discussed at a later date. Whoever's taking notes. Right, Katie? Thanks. So, approved? Good. Thank you. Right, next paper is paper 10 on page 167 of your bookies. This is the annual pay. Matt, thank you. Thank you very much. This is the annual pay policy statement. Can I just refer you to the summary on the front, section 3? The reason why we're looking at this is it is a legal requirement that we have an annual pay policy statement. The person, and this is just agreeing that we do have a pay policy statement. And it says in there, it may be updated throughout the financial year if for whatever reasons, okay? So all we're doing is just stating that we do have an annual pay policy statement. I mean, we know it's going to be changed because we had a 2-hour meeting on Monday with some of the recommendations. So I don't want you to get bogged down in minutiae. So, this is Molly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. As the Chairman has already said, this report is an annual report which meets the requirement of the Localism Act 2011, whereby we are required to prepare and publish a pay policy statement every 12 months. So for members who may not have seen this report in previous years, it provides us with a consistent framework for us to demonstrate transparency in how we pay our staff and how they are rewarded. There are specific policies and remuneration principles that must be included in the pay policy statement, and these are listed at paragraph 6 of the report, and they are all included within the pay policy statement at Appendix A. A key aspect of the statement is to show the relationship between the remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer and the remuneration of the rest of the workforce. And the multiples are currently 5.1 when compared with our average green or support staff, and 4.9 when compared with the average grey book member of staff salary. These pay multiples have been consistent within our organisation for a number of years, and that's captured at table 11 within the report. And when we compare ourselves against similar fire services, we know that our multiples are also very similar. So, for example, Essex's is 4.7 and Kent's is 5. So the Localism Act stipulates that the pay policy statement at Appendix A must be considered at a full authority meeting and cannot be delegated to a subcommittee. Its publication ensures that key stakeholders such as our staff, trade unions and our communities are able to scrutinise the pay of our most senior officers and the pay frameworks that we apply for the rest of our staff. Failure to publish a pay policy statement could raise concerns from those stakeholders about our approach to openness and transparency in respect of pay. If the statement is approved today, then the risk will be mitigated by publishing the pay policy statement on our website as soon as possible in an accessible format for those key stakeholders to be able to review. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Molly. Questions, members? David.
I learnt something. I thought we only had the one chief officer. But that's not so, is it? You know, the Localism Act refers to a number of chief officers.
Any more, members? No? Okay, so if we go to the recommendation.
Chair, if I may just say, after our conversations over the last 3 days, we did have an issue, a technical issue on the protocol of this paper coming out 5 days before that we couldn't do anything about. It needs certain amendments, which we've discussed, and unfortunately, it's fallen in with Appendix B a little bit too much. It will be changed before the March meeting, as is quite okay according to the paper. We have to treat the Chief Officer Local Award entirely separate from this. I think that's how we're working on things. Okay. Other than that, I agree with the paper. We need 1 or 2 amendments, but if that's permitted before the March meeting, then that will be okay.
Okay, thank you.
My opinion.
April meeting.
April meeting, sorry, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Right, so the recommendation is that Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority approve the pay policy statement at Appendix A for publication on Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service website. Approve, read, approve, whatever. Thank you. Thank you. So, moving on to item 11, the Firefighters Pension Board. I would invite Paul Hodgson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Possibly the most significant item on the agenda today, or maybe not. But just a short paper here, really, to deal with some administration associated with the pension board. And you all will know we have to have a pension board, so we've got various officers and members appointed to it who are coming up to the end of their 4-year terms. So the membership set out at the table in paragraph 5, and the report really deals with the recommendation to reappoint the members of the board who are coming up to the end of their term for another 4-year term, as they're all willing and able to serve on the pension board. So I don't really think there's a lot more to say about it other than that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Members? David Harrison?
Yes, this is one of those sort of behind-the-scenes jobs that we're very grateful that people are prepared to undertake. I guess, you know, my experience of pensions on Hampshire County Council, it can be quite a dry subject at the best of times. Do we ever get opportunity to thank them for the work that they do? How's that done? Yes.
Any more, please? No? Okay. Recommendation on page 179 is that a further 4-year term of office be approved for each of the pension board members, listed in paragraph 6 of this report, be approved by the full authority. Approved? Thank you. Thank you. Right, we now move to an excluded item. So we are now going to switch off, Sparks, if you would.